Okay, Warden, we have Dalton. Would you mind turning your video on and just doing a quick audio check?
I am working on the camera, if you can hear me.
Okay, we can hear you, and that's totally fine. I've just sent a message to see if you could start it. If that doesn't work, that's okay.
Yeah, it's saying it's failed to start video camera. I can go to my settings and play with it.
So that's okay. So what I'm going to ask is we're going to have Matthew, could you do a quick audio as well? Check.
Good morning.
Thank you. So Dalton, if you have a comment of any kind, I'm just going to ask that you turn your microphone on and then just kindly just go through the warden and he will indicate that it's your turn, okay?
Okay, I can do that. Yep.
Perfect. We're going to get this show on the road. Warden, go ahead.
All right. I'll start with council meetings are available live through Zoom and recordings may be posted online on the County of Huron's YouTube channel. You may be seen and or heard as part of these broadcasts, and your name, comments, and or presentation materials will become part of the public record. And with that, I'd like to call this meeting to order, meeting of the Audit Committee, and we have an approval of the agenda to start off with. Do I have a mover and a seconder for that? So it's Councillor Harding, Councillor Elvin McClellan. Those in favor? And that is carried. And I would like to introduce Dalton Hamilton. Dalton is joining us as our citizen representative to the Audit Committee. So welcome, Dalton. And I'm going to ask, is there any pecuniary interest that needs to be disclosed at this time? Seeing none, then we will go to our audit planning report. And Matthew Goderich is with us from KPMG. And Matthew, welcome. And when you're ready, we'll just turn it over to you.
Great, thank you so much. I will share my screen as we work through the presentation. Susan, if you can just confirm that you're seeing my presentation up there.
It's perfect. Thank you.
Okay, great. So we'll take a few minutes to walk through our audit plan. This has been included in your agenda materials, so we'll expect that you've had at least a chance to preview it. And it is very consistent with what we've seen in the past, so I'll be respectful of council's time and just touch on either the highlights or things that are important for committee to understand or areas that require specific disclosure from the auditors to committee. So with you today is just myself, Matthew Goderich. Donald's working on some other things, so we sort of gave him the morning off. As we work through some of the highlights, I'll stop on this page just for a second. We do have a few new accounting standards that are applicable for the current year, being mostly revenue, intangible assets, and public-private partnerships. At this stage, we're not anticipating a significant impact of those standards on the county's financial statements, certainly much less than last year's change with asset retirement obligations. Every year at this meeting, we do talk about materiality in the audit and how we use materiality and what it means. So materiality in the audit is designed for two primary purposes. First, it sets about the scoping and the extent of testing that we perform. And then secondly, we use materiality to evaluate any uncorrected errors or differences that we find in the accounts and still allow us to issue a clean audit opinion. So we've always issued a clean audit opinion, so that's never been a problem. We've set materiality this year. We call it group materiality, so that is for the consolidated financial statements. We've set that at about $2.1 million, which is approximately 2% of prior year revenues. So that is consistent with how we would audit other upper tier municipalities in the province. The standards require us to set materiality on that benchmark anywhere between 0.5% and 3%. So we're kind of right in the middle, which recognizes that we don't believe that there's a high risk environment to these financial statements, but we also don't want to set a materiality that's too high and risk that we might not catch any material errors. I often get asked the question around the size of materiality, and $2 million sounds like a big number. And certainly we would expect management and council to be, running the affairs of the county to a much greater degree of precision than $2 million. And that is, generally, a good expectation. From our perspective, though, we would say, if your expenses or if your revenues were higher or lower by, $2 million, would somebody looking at your financial statements come to a different conclusion as to, the size and scope of operations of the county? And we look at, expenses over 100 million, we look at revenues nearing 100 million. That does make some sense. Furthermore, we do look at every transaction of the county is subject to auditing and testing. So regardless of how big or how small, obviously the larger the size of the transaction, the greater chance it does get picked up in our scope. But everything is subject to testing. And where we find errors that exceed $100,000, we will bring those forward and report them to this group. So we do use much more granularity in our work as we go through. On this slide, we just identify that there are some post-employment benefits. These are the health and dental benefits that are offered to early retirees. And the county uses an actuarial specialist, Dixon, to assist with that calculation. And we do work with them in our audit. I'll move on to the group scoping or the risk assessment summary. And so here we identify our initial risk assessment for the major captions in the financial statements. And you'll see in the current year risk rating, we have one significant and the rest are base. In the prior year, it was a little bit different. Our risk assessment is broken into sort of three parts. We have base, elevated, and significant. What base means is we don't believe there are significant elements of that account, either high estimation uncertainty, high degree of judgment, high degree of complexity, that would move it off sort of the normal level of risk for error. For management override of controls, we have talked about this. This is the presumed fraud risk in the audit. So every auditor is required to consider this and consider it a significant risk. So this is not new. And then in the prior year, with the advent of the asset retirement obligation standard, we did have that one as an elevated risk, given that it was new. But now that that is sort of in its second year of adoption, and we don't anticipate a lot of changes, we've actually reduced that risk rating to base. That doesn't mean we don't test all of these. We certainly do, but it just describes and articulates the level and extent of work that we perform. So I'll move through the major sections of the file and touch on them very, very briefly. I did mention asset retirement obligation. At this point in that journey, we're really looking at potential new obligations that have been existed, but then also making sure that the previous ones that were recorded are being dealt with appropriately. For grant revenue and deferred revenue, so this is for the significant amount of funding that the county gets from other levels of government. So we do confirm those amounts, primarily with the province, and make sure that amounts that have been recognized in the statements do meet the terms of those agreements. On tangible capital assets, so a reminder, this is the roads, the bridges, the buildings, the trucks, the housing stock, all of the hard assets that the county owns. Again, there's significant increases of this each and every year, so we want to test that to make sure that's appropriate. We also test to make sure the depreciation is being calculated in a way that's reasonable and accurate. And then we also will look at other non-capital accounts, such as repairs and maintenance or other operating expenses, to make sure nothing's being missed. For payroll and other operating expenses, obviously payroll is a significant component of the county's annual spend. So we do a number of tests there that look at full-time equivalent movements, changes in contract pay rates, hours worked, and make sure all of that sort of sums up to what we expect it to be. For taxation revenue, y'all know that the lower tier municipalities collect taxation on behalf of the county. And so we do confirm the amounts that have been collected on behalf of the county with each of the lower tier municipalities. And then for user charge revenue, there are a variety of streams of user charge revenue for the county. We look at that on a sort of an annual basis. How has it fluctuated from year to year and compared to budget, and to make sure there's nothing that we're missing there. On this slide, there's a lot of words, but effectively we're required as part of this process to inquire of any known issues with respect to fraud or misconduct or wrongdoing within the county. We've had additional discussions with staff and management and haven't identified any concerns, reminding the group that the scope of this inquiry is really around items within the county operations, not necessarily how the county may have been victim of fraud from an outside party. On to the next slide, we provide just a brief overview of our path. Typically we have reported in July of the summer. I think there's a bit of an effort to accelerate that slightly. Hopefully we can report by June sometime, so that would be good. And then we provide a bit of information on audit quality. I won't go through that in detail. And then in terms of fees and independence, we've outlined the fees that we have already pre-approved for this year based on the original RFP, and those are all within that scope. We provide a bit of a description of some of those other items here. And then beyond that, we just have some additional information in the appendices. So I will hand the meeting back to the warden for any questions or comments for me.
Thank you, Matthew. I'm going to open it up for council. Is there any questions you have for Matthew? Past Warden McClellan.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. Through you to Matthew. Matthew, this is just a general question about audits. We actually had a question last night at our council meeting, and I thought this was appropriate place to ask it. So we had agreed to a line item in our budget about raising money for a reserve, and the reserve money was raised, but it was put into the wrong reserve, and then it wasn't caught for a year. Is that something that an audit would catch because the money was raised for a reserve? It was put in a reserve, but it was put into the wrong one. Is that something that a general audit would catch, or other than the fact that the staff eventually found it, how would council ever be brought up to speed on something like that?
Yeah, so typically the audits wouldn't be concerned with where reserves are between the various reserve categories. So say, for example, and I'm just making this up, say you had a tax stabilization reserve and you had a winter control reserve, and 100,000 was supposed to go into winter control but went into tax stabilization instead. So I would say that would be outside of the scope of our work. We'd be more concerned with making sure that the money was raised, that was raised, was appropriately recorded as revenue in the year that was raised, and then how staff sort of allocates that either to reserve or to general surplus is really sort of outside of our scope.
Okay, thank you very much for that info.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for Matthew? I'm not seeing any, and I'm going to go to Dalton. Dalton, as our citizen rep, is there anything you would like to add to the conversation?
Sorry about the camera there, everyone. I finally got it going. I do have one question for you, Matthew. You mentioned that revenue recognition isn't a significant risk for the county. Would that tie into kind of like the audit cost overall and help reduce fees for the audit?
Yeah, so we would have incorporated that risk assessment in our fee quote for sure. And let me sort of maybe answer the second part of the question, because we do get this from time to time. If we were asked to do more extensive work in an area such as revenue recognition, that would be considered out of scope and would be additional effort and cost.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Great. Any other questions? Well, Matthew, thank you for the audit planning report, and I'm going to be going to council and asking for a motion to receive this report from Matthew. So that's past Warden McNeil and Councillor Finch would second that. Those in favor? And that is carried. And I believe we can now move on to adjournment of the audit committee. Councillor Dietrich and Councillor Noel would second that. Those in favor? That is carried. And thank you both to Matthew and to Dalton for joining us for the audit committee meeting. So I believe we can roll right into our county council meeting. And I'd like to call this meeting to order. And with the couple comments for Warden's remarks, just want to extend a thanks to all of staff for their efforts in dealing with our Huron County winter. They have been working hard to deal with what our winter weather has given us, and we appreciate all those efforts. And secondly, I would like to congratulate Vicky and the economic development team on the farm succession planning project. Some of you will be aware, but that project was nominated for an award at the EDCO annual meeting, and it received an honorable mention for that project. And Vicky, on behalf of Huron County Council, want to congratulate the ECDev team on a job well done. It was lots of hard work went into that, and it was certainly well recognized out and about. So good job.
Thank you, Warden.
We have an agenda for this morning's meeting, and I'd be looking for a mover and a seconder to adopt the agenda. That would be Councillor Vanstone, and seconded by Councillor Klopp. Those in favor? And that is carried. Is there any pecuniary interest that anybody needs to declare at this time? Seeing none, then I am going to go on to the minutes of our previous meeting, and if there's any errors or omissions to address, and if not, I'd be looking for a mover and a seconder. So Councillor Becker would move the minutes, and past Warden McNeil would second that. Those in favor? And that is carried. And under delegations, we do have a presentation by Donna Apavu for the Manessatung Bridge Association. And I believe Donna will be joining us. So just once everything's set up and ready, Donna, we would turn the presentation time over to you.
Can everyone hear me?
Yes, can hear you. Thank you, Donna. Welcome.
Perfect. Thank you, Warden and members of County Council. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. For residents of Huron County, Manessatung Bridge, formerly known as the CPR Bridge, links this area to the rest of the province and the country. In early years, it made it possible for farmers to ship their goods to markets year-round. The bridge and the rail line played a vital role in the agriculture of Huron County and established Huron as one of the top counties in the province, if I might say. The line that passes by our small towns and farms continues as a link to our history and our livelihoods. And for this reason, we feel every attempt must be made to preserve it. And it continues to be a focal point, now part of the western part of the G2G rail trail. And as of 2024, a link to Lake Huron for the Trans-Canada Trail, Canada's national trail system. Manessatung Bridge Association itself is a not-for-profit. As you may know, in 1990, the local community raised enough funds to purchase the bridge and save it from demolition. When railway operations ceased, there was no group or level of government that wanted to take that on. So the Bridge Association was formed to hold title with a mission to advocate for the bridge and connecting trails. We were granted charitable status, and we have continued to have that mission as central. Our yearly fundraising is modest. Our regular members and contributors provide about $10,000 a year for insurance, administration, and routine maintenance. And we have about once a decade tackled a larger project from the $50,000 to $100,000 range, enjoying wonderful support from the community. But for us, 2024 has been a very eventful year. Next slide, please. Today, I'll recap the engineering report that was the impetus for our current fundraising drive, update on our trail partners, and finally, the tentative bridge rehabilitation construction timeline for you. Next slide. As reported in our last presentation to Council in February 2024, the most recent report by our engineers at BM Ross 2020 advised us that deteriorating concrete tops on piers 2, 3, 4, and 5 was encroaching on bearing seats that support the 18-ton steel girders of the bridge. They also told us it would be imperative to repair those within 5 years. Coming up now. They also outlined provisional work on pier tops and abutments that would be advantageous to complete at the same time as the site securement for critical work. These advantages are both in terms of cost effectiveness and reduced disruption to bridge access. Our next engineering review is due next year, and if the bridge does not pass safety standards, we would have to close it to public access. As well, if a bearing seat were to become destabilized, it would be extremely difficult and costly to repair at that point. The cost then would be a cost of dismantling, also prohibitive to consider. Next slide, please. So we are committed to maintain the bridge, and we do this in collaboration with our trail partners, Maitland Trail Association, winding through county townships along the Maitland River, the Great Lakes Waterfront Trail, traversing the county in a north-south orientation, and G2G, running along the historic rail line. And now, as of 2024, part of the Trans-Canada Trail, connecting us across the national trail systems. With this new affiliation, trail steward groups are eligible for funding support for projects such as signage and infrastructure repair. Some applications, including those for infrastructure repair we are now undertaking, require matching funding. Early support in our fundraising from ACW Township and Count of Goderich enabled us to present matching funds to Trans-Canada Trail for the project, and we are pleased to announce that our Valentine's Day present on February 14th was to receive notice that our $60,000 application to them was successful. It affirms to me that when local governments and organizations get behind a community project, it enables us to leverage that support to bring more resources into the community. It is also true that there has been some resistance to trails, and some have expressed fears that trail users would threaten adjacent properties. As we found with the bridge, the better managed and maintained the structure, the less likely it is to be damaged. Bikers, hikers, and walkers who use the trail to the benefit of their health and well-being are unlikely to cause damage. And if anything, visitors are appreciative of the opportunity to use the trail and value it as an important part of their outdoor experience. As it is, the trail and bridge is virtually free of litter, maintained by volunteers from our association and the other trail groups, maintaining it available to the public free of charge. Next slide. These are all good things, but historically, it's been difficult to get a picture of how the trail and bridge are actually being used. So recently, data called Propulso data, based on anonymized cell phone data, yes, the phone that you're carrying can help us out, can now provide some insight. The data presented here in this slide covers a 4-month period between June 20th and September 20th, 2024. In that time period, you'll see in the top corner, there were 21,200 visits recorded. Additionally, mapping of the visitor entry and exit points to the trail, not shown on this graph, indicate that about 60% of trail users were either getting on or off the trail in Goderich, which would mean to us crossing the bridge. Our takeaway is that trail infrastructure, including the bridge, is well used. And based on previous years not shown here, that use is increasing. Next slide, please. Diving a little bit deeper, we can also get some insights into what the trail looks like as a tourism asset, bringing dollars into our community. Figure 2 gives an indication that in the time period between June and September 2024, just over half the users were from over 60 kilometers away. This indicates to me that these infrastructure assets and amenities both attract tourists and provide opportunities for local residents to spend their recreation time here in the community. That certainly inspires our fundraising efforts. Next slide, please. So our fundraising to date, in August 2024, we learned that our FedDev application was successful in the amount of $200,000 for funding towards bridge concrete repairs should we go ahead. We have been actively fundraising and have found very good support. As mentioned, Town of Goderich and Township of ACW providing $50,000 each. We also have major commitments from service clubs, individuals, and businesses that have made very generous pledges, as well as the just announced Trans-Canada Trail funds. We have now reached our funding goal for part 1 of the project, enabling us to accept a bid and as of February 10th, sign a contract with Stratcon Construction to do the highest priority repairs this summer, 2025. Next slide, please. So the contract for the pier top repairs has been awarded. We must also report that while the contractor is working, the bridge will be closed to public access. Stratcon has indicated to expect 4 to 5 months of closure. The closure expected to begin in mid to late 2025, April of 2025. This will have implications for trail groups and local events in terms of planning for route diversions, as well as for the roadways. As noted by Marlene Kohler, Executive Director at Great Lakes Waterfront Trail, for active transportation and trail users, there is no alternative route that doesn't include a busy Highway 21 or significant kilometers on roadways without active transportation infrastructure. So that will require the attention for the redirects. What I'd like to bring to your attention is that if we are able to secure further funding in the short term for the provisional work outlined in the engineering report, there is still a possibility to include some or all of it in this summer's schedule. Our fundraising target for that is now $300,000. As noted earlier, this number would be much higher if we do not get the work done this summer while the contractor is set up, as access is quite difficult and there are high setup costs. This would also prevent a second bridge closure in an upcoming busy tourist season. So in closing, I guess our encouragement to you is that you keep both the history of the bridge and its present day importance in mind if you consider any discretionary spending that you may have at the county this coming year. Know that the bridge and the trails are safe, accessible assets in Huron County, and you have a unique opportunity to help to preserve this nationally significant landmark in Canada for generations to come. We also, invite any of you with an interest in making a personal contribution in any amount to reach out to us. In our view, it is the broad base of support that we have that is a true testament to community spirit in Huron County. And then for the last slide, just like to say thank you and welcome and invite any questions that you might have, and I will do my best to answer them.
Thank you, Donna, for bringing us up to speed with the latest developments there. I'm going to open it up for council if there's any questions for Donna. Councillor Vanstone.
Thank you, Mr. Warden, and I'm sorry I'm slow getting this mute off. But anyways, I do have a question. The bridge needs extra work, and you're looking at somehow coming up with $300,000, and you're looking maybe at the county to help you out on this. Is that what I'm understanding? And if it is, then I guess I'm looking at what you would be looking at as a contribution from the county. Thank you.
Donna, go ahead.
I think we would welcome any amount that the county might be able to put on the table. We're looking to, we've made further inquiries with community partners. We are also putting together a grant application to the Trillium Foundation with the province. But any amount that could complement those would be helpful. An amount even in the order of what was contributed by yourself at ACW and that at from town of Goderich would certainly help to bolster our efforts. As I indicated, what I've really been impressed by is that when an organization is supported by local governments, it does build confidence in external funders that that you have a solid project and plan.
I believe Councillor Ginn has his hand up.
Yes, thank you. And to you, Donna, do you have a dollar figure in the difference between doing it in one stage and in two stages?
We know that about 30% of the cost is securing the site, given that we have the water and the bridge access being a bit of a challenge to contractors, and there are a lot of environmental protections that have to be put in place. They have to put in silt control and many other things. So anywhere in the range of 30 to 50% of the cost. So I would think it would not be a stretch to determine that it could almost double the cost to have to do it in another season, which would make our grant applications a little more daunting.
Okay, and I assumed that there was a fair difference in the dollar value. And I'll just throw this out to County Council to consider, but I would submit that it may be worthwhile to provide a loan to the Bridge Association, do the work all at once, save them significant numbers of dollars, but yet in the end not, cost the county a lot of money, a little lost interest, but other than that, I'd just throw that out there for discussion. Thank you.
I believe Councillor Basnet has his hand up.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Warden. Don, I just want to say congratulations on your fundraising to date with the part one. I know you and the group of people were, excuse me, concerned about the fundraising. Tremendous job. And, from what I've, through your presentation here, it looks like you're still looking for that 300,000 for the phase 2 or the part 2 of it. And I would agree with you, you don't want to have to shut the bridge down a second time, right? And I'm just curious as to what type of feelers do you have out there, and what type of sense do you have as a group as to where you are with raising the extra 300,000? Is there money kind of already in support of principle that has been mentioned to you? Or is this something where you know that you need that 300,000 right now? Like there's no mention of any extra funds coming in at this time? Because I know you mentioned you've had some conversations with service clubs and organizations. I'm just curious as to what your feelings are. Personally, I would prefer to see this happen all at once, and I'm sure you would too. You're looking at shutting down the bridge, obviously during the busy season of when the bridge would be used. And, that's a lot of tourist dollars possibly lost to the county with this happening. I realize it needs to happen, and the time of year, it needs to happen at that time of year. But obviously to shut it down 2 separate times during a busy season would be very unfortunate. So I know that's a long comment there for you, Donna, but I would appreciate any information you could provide.
I guess what we have heard from our contractor is that that they need to know by end of March latest, but the earlier that they can know, the better, in order to be able to efficiently budget for including the extra work this year and reducing the close. So we're working against 2 things. We're working against a timeline where we need to have the money secured by the end of March. The application that we're putting into Trillium, again, because we've had such good support, I think that it does help our applications. But that application is for 200,000, but we won't know about that until beyond the point of time that we would need the funds committed to the contractor. And we've certainly had interest from several service clubs that haven't been able, because of their meeting schedules, to give us a set amount of dollars at this point in time. So it leaves us in a really awkward spot. We're optimistic that we can generate at least a good portion of the funds, but we also understand that the contractor can't wait on making their orders for the summer.
Mr. Warren, through you, could I ask Councillor again just to repeat what he had said in regards to a loan, just so I have a better understanding of it?
Go ahead, Councillor, past Warden again.
Sure. I mean, if the county were to loan the organization the $300,000, you know, it would significantly reduce the cost that they would incur in doing it in 2 stages. And I mean, the cost to the county, once the money's paid back, would be lost interest of some point. So at this point, I'm going to make a motion for a staff report on the possibility of a loan to the Bridge Association, and ask that be brought back as quickly as we could, because you know, obviously there's timelines involved here, but to me, it would save them a lot of money. It's obviously an important asset to tourism in Huron County, and yet I don't think that would violate our policy of not giving grants.
I would second that motion, Mr. Warden.
All right, so we have a motion and it's been seconded. Any further comment? Past Warden McClellan.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. I certainly like this idea, and it's, in my mind, no different than sometimes it's better for us to go and borrow money from the province to get a project done when it's cost effective. And we're really talking about the same thing here. The only thing I would like to also see in the report when it comes back, though, is that if they do get the Trillium grant or any other funding, that any funding that they get that was directly associated with this project, that money's paid back right away, not just over a monthly payment or yearly payment thing for whatever term we come up with, if we come up with something. Thank you.
Okay, any further comments? Not seeing any hands, I'm going to now call the question. Those in favor of this staff report? And that is carried. So Donna, I want to congratulate you on your grant application efforts so far, and thank you for the update. And also thank you for the efforts that you and your group put into maintaining the bridge and the trail. So thank you for that, and good to have you join us today. I'm going to move on in the agenda to councillors' comments.
Excuse me, Warden, would you mind terribly going back and actually receiving that report for information?
I think we could do that just for our clerk.
Thank you.
I would be looking for a motion to receive the report on the Minnesota Bridge presented by Donna Epavu. And that is Councillor Vanstone and Councillor Harding would second that. Those in favor? And that is carried. And thank you for that reminder, Clerk Cronin. And I believe now we can go on to councillors' comments if there is any. Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, Warden. I just received word back. The Ag Expo is still on today.
Okay, thank you for that. Any other councillor comments? Councillor Bazinet.
Just want to make everyone aware that this Saturday, February 26th, is the coldest night of the year walk, being held all over. One in Goderich just happening Saturday. Fundraising is going quite well. The team that I've organized is actually #2 in all of Canada, and I think there's like a little over 6,600 teams that have organized to raise funds. If any county council members would like to make a donation towards the cause, they can reach out to me by email, and I can provide a link. I do want to thank past Warden McNeil and Councillor Becker for making donations to myself. I will be sleeping outside this Friday, February 21st, I'll be outside for 12 hours, 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. And just to raise a little more awareness and have a better understanding of what it is like. I realize it's only 12 hours. I realize I have a warm house to go back to and food and all that, but I just want to have a better understanding of what people that are suffering, finding somewhere warm, finding food, shelter, you name it, what it is like for that 12 hours. So the invitation is out there. I'm not expecting any of you to join me, but if you wanted to come for a couple hours even, we are meeting at the performance stage Friday night at 7 p.m. And it's a great opportunity to get the community together and actually have conversations about, you know, what we can do to advocate for housing or whatever it is to help with the needs of our homeless issue that we are seeing all over Huron County. So thank you, Warden.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Besnet. Any others under councillor comments? Seeing none, we're going to move on to our consent agenda, item 7.1 through 7.5. If there's anything specific anybody wants to draw attention to, you can do that. And if not, then I'd be looking for a motion to receive for information. Councillor Warden Ginn.
Thank you. Under Public Works, I just had a question on the County Road 7 geotechnology investigation. I drove that road a few years ago and it was an absolute disaster. And I just wonder what the results of that investigation was, if you could share that.
So I'd be turning that to Imran. If you would care to answer that, please, Imran.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Warden, through you. Yeah, so the investigation was completed back in fall. We got the final report. The intent of the investigation was to go ahead with the design for repaving. So the project is proposed for repaving this year in the capital project. The intent of the investigation was more so to get the core thicknesses of the asphalt so we can do a recycling design when we go for repaving.
So the base was in sound condition?
The base was okay, yes. We are okay to proceed with the recycling. Nothing crazy that stands out that we would need to dig up the road. There are two spots where there's two culvert locations that have distresses. That's where we're doing 2 digouts. But other than that, the rest of the road is okay. We will be doing a recycling, asphalt recycling job.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for answering that, Imran. Is there anything else? If not, then I would take a motion to receive the consent agenda. Councillor Heffer, seconded by Councillor Noel. Those in favor? And that is carried. Moving on to item 8 in our agenda is social and property services. And Jeff Kerslake is available for questions regarding the Jacob Memorial Building and the boiler replacement. So welcome, Jeff. Any questions for Jeff? Not seeing any, then there is a recommended motion if someone's willing to put that forward. So Past Warden Ginn, seconded by Councillor McClellan. Those in favor? And that is carried. Moving on to the affordable housing solutions. And Jamie Koskamp is here to answer and to present for us this increase in market rent. So Jamie, welcome. And when you're ready, you go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Warden Heffer. So through you this morning, Warden, I am presenting the report titled Affordable Housing Solutions, Inc., a request for increase to the market rent. So back in 2019, Affordable Housing Solutions received just over $1.25 million under the rental housing component of the Investment in Affordable Housing Extension and Social Infrastructure Fund programs. This funding was awarded to create 12 one-bedroom affordable units in the town of Goderich, just at the end of Strang Court. At the time of the contribution agreement, an alternate average market rent request was approved, and this set the rental amount at $650 per month. As per Schedule D, Section 4.1 of their contribution agreement, rent increases can only occur after 12 months in accordance with the Residential Tenancies Act. Section 4.2 further stipulates that increases cannot exceed provincial rent control increase guidelines or surpass 80% of average market rent unless the ministry approves an alternate average market rent. So since occupancy in 2020, rent control increases have been applied, and this results in a 2025 rental amount of $708.38. So while Schedule D, Section 4.3 of the contribution agreement does allow for an average market rent review in the 11th year, which would put us at 2030, the proponent is seeking an earlier review. So Affordable Housing Solutions has submitted a market rental study to support their request for an average market rent adjustment for their one-bedroom units. And this study proposes market rents in the range of $1,500 to $1,600 per month. And when we calculate it out at the 80% average market rent, this would range between $1,200 to $1,280 per month. So to provide some further context on the rental rates in Huron County, so the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing set the 2023 allowable rent for investment in affordable housing funded units in Huron County at $787, making 80% of average market rent $630. So to address financial pressures and maintain service level standards, our Huron County Council recently approved a maximum rent of $1,000 per month for our Huron County Housing Corporation one-bedroom units. It is important to note, though, that tenants in Huron County Housing Corp units have the opportunity to receive rent subsidy. The maximum rent represents the highest amount an RGI tenant could pay. However, in most cases, tenants pay a subsidized amount, which is less than the maximum $1,000 per month. Huron County Housing Corporation tenants paying the new maximum rental amount have undergone an income assessment confirming their ability to afford this rental amount based on an RGI calculation. Unlike the Huron County Housing Corporation, Affordable Housing Solutions does not operate on an RGI model, and this has raised a few concerns about affordability. I would like to disclose, though, as well, that rental rates for our nearby 40-unit Gibbon Street project have yet to be finalized. However, we are certain that the 3 federally and provincially funded units must adhere to the 80% average market rent limit. 10 supported units will be RGI, and the rent for the remaining municipally funded units is still under review, but it is expected to align with other county affordable housing sites, as well as ministry average market rents. So the options for council to consider, the first option would be to maintain the current rent structure and allow Affordable Housing Solutions to apply for a rent increase in January of 2030, which is the 11th year of their affordability period. The second option would be to increase rent to align with the Huron County Housing Corporation one-bedroom rate of $1,000 per month. And this would only apply to new incoming tenants, not to their existing tenants. And the third option would be to approve the rent increase as proposed by Affordable Housing Solutions, ranging from $1,200 to $1,280 per month. And again, this would only apply to incoming tenants, not in situ tenants. While there's no direct financial impact to the County of Huron, Affordable Housing Solutions is set to make some additional annual revenue based on the options that have been provided. So if option 1 is selected, there would be no change to the current rental amounts, and there would be no resulting additional revenue. The second option, though, by increasing the rental amounts to $1,000 to equal the Huron County Housing Corp, would result in additional revenue of just over $10,000 or just around $10,500. This is assuming that half of the units would be would swap out mid-year and they would pay the new increased rent for approximately 6 months. And then the last option would be to allow the increase up to the proposed amount from Affordable Housing Solutions, which would range from $1,200 to $1,280. And this would result in just over $17,700 to ranging up to $20,600. And again, the same assumption has been made that half the units would swap out and would pay the increased amount for 6 months. So the recommendation put forth by staff is to select option 1, and that would be to maintain the current rent structure and allow Affordable Housing Solutions to apply for a rent increase in January of 2030, which is the 11th year of the affordability period. So I'm happy to address if there's any questions or any further details requested by council.
Thank you, Jamie. I want to turn it to council if there's any questions for Jamie. Councillor Klopp.
Thank you. Who is the Affordable House Solutions and who runs that?
So through you, Warden Heffer, back in 2018, Councillor Clapp, we put out a request for proposal for private developers to express their interest in getting funding to create affordable housing units. And so Affordable Housing Solutions was the successful proponent back in 2018. I believe their head office is in the Toronto area, but they do have other properties in the local area. And I want to say Goderich Place, I believe, is one property that's owned by Affordable Housing Solutions as well.
Okay, but that has nothing to do with our Gibbons Street or other projects?
It does not, Councillor Klopp. It's just we wanted to provide full transparency because Gibbons Street is just a few yards away from Strand Court, and our rental rates have yet to be determined, but they will be in for most. I anticipate that they will be a bit higher than what Affordable Housing Solutions rents.
And if I may, through the chair, ask just one more clarification then. It says that this doesn't affect our financials, so that explains it's an affordable housing. It's a different, and we offloaded it, which is fine. But then again, it seems we're the ones that make a decision. So any rate increases or not, it's the public will be told it's not us, it's the county. It's which is how I just wanted to keep clear on that. Who would they consider the person that makes the changes? It's us, is it? I guess
so through you, yes, through you, Warden Heffer. So they signed a contribution agreement with the county, and back at that time when they signed that contribution agreement, that was when we had agreed to the amount, or sorry, that the county agreed to the rental amount that they were able to pay. That's why we are bringing it back today, Councillor Klopp, because it is captured by their contribution agreement. So we wanted to make council aware. Council had approved it in the first place, so we're looking for council's approval on any changes to those rental amounts.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Councillor Noel.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. I'm just curious if these folks have given us any indication that they're facing any financial pressures, or if they're having any trouble maintaining service standards. Like, is there any reason other than simply the market rent analysis that they're asking for an increase?
Sure. So through you, Warden, Councillor Noel, they have indicated that, you know, as a result of COVID and such, and just simply the cost of living, insurance is higher. Just the overall cost to operate a building, maintenance costs and such are higher as well. I don't think they're in it just to simply get more rent because they can. There are some added costs. I'm not aware of any financial hardships though, but I do believe that it would make it simpler, or not simpler, but more cost effective for them if they did receive a bit of an increase.
Past Warden McClellan.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. Jamie, I really appreciate your explanation here this morning, because I had a little bit of trouble following it when I read it through the first time. I guess I have a couple of concerns. One, they took on something on behalf of our community by doing this. I don't want them to get to the point where they're strapped, which is why I consider option 2, which is kind of middle of the road between top and bottom. My only other concerns though is that if the tenants have a problem meeting the new rent thresholds, what happens at that point? Because with the cost of inflation and food and everything else, my first priority would be to make sure that my family's being fed before I pay my rent. Whether that's right or wrong, but I would think that would be the first priority. And the fact that I've read some reports where they are suspecting that rent figures in the province will come down over the next couple of years because there is a little bit of a surplus in certain areas. The market is softening, I guess is the way to phrase it. if in fact we went with option 2, is it only the proponent that has the option to request something different if in fact we see a negative impact to the community?
So through you, Warden, yes, because the proponent was the one that agreed to the terms and conditions around the funding, it would be the proponent, yes, that is the one that makes the ask to adjust the rental amounts, yes.
So just to go back to the first part of my question then, if we agreed to option 2, which is kind of middle of the road here, how is it handled if some of those rent increases are not sustainable by the residents?
So through you, Warden Heffer, there is an opportunity, Councillor McClellan, for those units to receive a subsidy. Now that would have to be a separate application. It wouldn't be driven by the proponent and the county. It would just be housing programs that we offer with other funding that comes through the Housing Services Division at the county.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification.
I believe Councillor Bazinet had his hand up.
Past Warden McClellan actually asked one of my questions, but then the subsidy part is like, if someone applies for subsidy, like what are the requirements? Like if they're making so much money and all that stuff, if the rent goes up, I'm just concerned because as I'm sure other council members have maybe received messages from current tenants that they're concerned or rent has increased before and they no longer can afford to be there. And there's possible looks of eviction and stuff like that. And, you know, with all the work that we talk about homelessness and stuff like that, I would hate to put someone out on the streets, you know, because they can't afford the rent that's being paid right now or the increase. So I do have some concerns with an increase. I can understand it, but you know, some of the emails I've received lately are concerning to me.
So you, through you, Warden Heffer, the subsidy that would be calculated, Councillor Bazinet, would be, it considers income, it considers rental amounts, it considers utilities as well. So if the rent increases, the subsidy would capture that and would provide a higher allowance then for an individual that makes an application to the subsidy, which is the Canada Ontario Housing Benefit.
Councillor Harding?
I support option 2 for maybe different reasons than Councillor McClellan, but I think we have to stay somewhat current or do some increases or we're going to fall behind and then we aren't able to help either. So I support option 2.
Councillor Klopp?
Thank you. Interesting discussion. But if I'm clear, there's no financial, we're not getting any money out of this extra. Back to my colleague, when we talked about the age for the homes, that's our cost, our revenue. This is, for obviously reasons, this company, Affordable House Solutions, took this on. And going back to the argument that, well, they can apply for housing, future housing. My first question is right now any of the rooms there already getting a supplement? Can I ask? And then I have a follow-up if I can have that cleared up. Like right now it's $700. Are people getting a supplement? Anybody?
So through you, Warden Heffer, I am not aware, Councillor Klopp, of anyone that does receive a subsidy at Strangford. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
Sorry, I will defer to Barb. I think Barb just wants to jump in with a comment there too.
Okay, Barbara.
Thanks very much. Yeah, thank you, Warden Heffer, through you. And just clarifying the piece about the subsidies that Jamie was mentioning. Subsidies are possible, assuming we have funding available to provide subsidies. We exhaust our subsidies each year. So anyone requiring a subsidy would have to go on a wait list, quite frankly. We receive some funding through the Canada Ontario Housing Benefit, and we exhaust at the beginning of each year or whenever we receive that. So please keep that in mind as a consideration that although a household may not be able to afford a rent, that's a higher amount. And keep in mind too that these are only for incoming vacant units. The existing ones would still have the rent control increase guideline, but it is still $1,000 or more that we're proposing on option 2. There would potentially be no subsidy for those particular households. So there is that difficulty there. The provider does not have to repay that $1.255 million that was originally identified by Jamie as well. That's funding that they do not have to repay at the end of the 21-year affordability agreement that they have with the county. Thank you.
And follow up, Councillor Clow?
Yeah, actually, Barb answered the question, but I didn't even want an answer almost. We look at the numbers in our budget. The government isn't handing out any more money on that side. As Councillor Bezanet has had some calls, I don't need to have the calls. I can understand. I don't need to have them to understand the issue. I think that, but Barb answered it. Right now, there is no real funding, and we should be just, there's no more Santa Claus right now, I guess. Sorry. And then so to have the recommendation that they pointed out, I think that's why they pointed to that as staff that, there's an increase, they're entitled to it. It was all part of the agreement when they signed back in 2019. And now I understand a little bit more. We did give them $1.2 million when they signed up. And I don't know about you, but when I do sign the contract with somebody and they give me money and they say there could be increases, but at the same time, I think this is the right motion, especially when the reality is there's no funding that they can apply for. And there's an election right now. We'll see what happens.
So last comment, past Warden McClellan.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. And I certainly agree with some of the comments that are made there. And yes, an agreement was signed and they received funding in 2019. The world has changed an awful lot since 2019. And things have come into play that a lot of us never expected. I guess the way I'm looking at it is that I'm not willing to go as high as what they've asked for, but I'd like to do something because if more of these groups or this group wants to come along and build more affordable housing, whether it be in Goderich or in Huron County, anywhere, I still think it's helping our overall community to have these outside groups take on these responsibilities themselves. And it's technically not costing us anything at the moment. And if we're not aware of anybody receiving subsidies, the rent is still pretty reasonable. I think we are expected to be a bit of the gatekeepers, the overseers, and I think it's reasonable to go the halfway point. Because if we can get more of these groups involved in doing some of this, then the county and the local taxpayer don't have to take on those responsibilities in the future. Thank you.
All right. So I'm going to ask for a motion. There's been a prepared motion with option 1. And I'm going to be looking for a motion to be put forward, whether it's option 1, 2, or 3. Pass Warden again.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to make the motion that we accept option 2. I completely agree with Councillor McClellan. I hate to see a cooperative effort go south on behalf of one party, and the other, and I gotta say I really struggled with this one, but people that move into the rental unit will know what the price of it is, and if it's too much for them to handle, I guess they'll have to look at other options. But yeah, this is a really tough decision, but I'm going to put forward the motion for option 2.
So motion put forward. Do I have a seconder for option 2? And that is past Warden McClellan. Any further discussion? Those in favor of option 2? That motion passes. All right, thank you, Jamie. We're going to move on to standby generators at EMS bases, and Jeff Kerslake is going to join us to speak to this. So Jeff, whenever you're ready.
Hey, good morning, Warden, and thank you, County Council, for having me in this morning. This is just a follow-up report that was requested back in November. It came through our Chief of EMS, Jeff Horstman. And with Property Services being the facility manager, we felt that between Jeff and I felt that maybe I was the best guy to maybe bring that report back. So you'll see the report that there's a cost attached to installing a generator at we have 4 EMS bases that we own. The cost is per one base, not tendered together. And the size of the generator would be large enough to power the entire facility. Along with that, we did include some operational costs that it takes to maintain the generators that we do have across the county, and then we did summarize a list as well. I believe was a request of all the generators we do have across the county currently. If anybody has any questions, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Jeff. Councillor Finch.
Yeah, thank you. And great report. Thank you very much, Jeff, for providing that. Maybe for Jeff Horstman, a question for him. I noticed that staff would have to go to another location, be relocated temporarily if there was a lengthy power outage. So I'm wondering if the power was to go out due to an ice storm, for example, for 24, 36 hours or 72 hours, what would the impact be in that order, those number of hours? Would the paramedics be able to recharge the power lifts, the radios, take their warranted breaks? Which, well, most importantly, would response times be compromised? So my question is really, where do our paramedics go if power goes out everywhere and everyone is impacted across the county? What's your response, please?
Jeff, are you able to speak to that?
Sure. So on that, to answer that question, so short term, less than 12 hours, it's usually not an operational issue that we have to worry about. The vehicles can idle when need be to do some of the charging. For heat, we can move the vehicles around within the county. As Councillor Fitch has indicated, it becomes a little bit more operationally challenging the longer the power outage is and the more widespread it is. We do have, so we would make every attempt to rotate them through the bases that do have backup generators, which are, which is Clinton as an example. So the Tucker Smith crew could be rotated into Clinton for part of the shift, and the Clinton crew could be rotated out to the Tucker Smith area. It's feasibly possible to do that. The longer the outage is, it becomes more difficult to do. So as Councillor Finch indicated, it does become more operationally difficult after 24, 36 hours and beyond. And as I indicated in my report initially, our provincial dispatch equipment becomes non-operational within the base after a period of time. Their backup power is only limited to 4 to 6 hours, kind of depending on how often it's used during that period of time. So there is contingencies in place, but the longer the outage is, the more difficult it becomes. And as Jeff Kerslake indicated, and I did indicate in my original report, operationally, they're not required by regulation to be in a base for us. But I mean, if council's direction is that we input them into the bases, then we could move that forward.
Follow up, Councillor Finch.
Yeah, thank you very much, and great response. Thanks, Jeff. So, but I noticed in the report too, if a new EMS base were to be built within Huron County, the recommendation will be to design it with a generator, and that makes sense to me. But it's important to note that that's on a rebuild. Does it not make sense to do that now? And I turn that to council. We are responsible for the safety of the public, as you know. And my concern is, like, if you look outside, Ryan Olmsted sent us an email earlier, roads are closed. So if all of a sudden our paramedics have to go to another location like Clinton, Goderich, Wingham, Seaforth, everybody's impacted. paramedics may not be able to get back to their location to respond to calls. $50,000 for a generator at each base, to me, that's just good planning and good risk management. I think we should, I'd like to propose a motion that we include that in the budget or start a report and perhaps have generators installed in all our bases. I think it's very important. We have them in our fire halls, we have them at our town halls, et cetera, et cetera. I was speaking to some members of the public this past weekend about this report, and they were quite honestly shocked that there's no generators at the ambulance bases. So for $50,000, I think it's a good investment, and I'd look to council for suggestions.
Past Warden Ginn.
Yeah, just a couple of comments. I think as we plan out new bases, and I'll use the Clinton example because I think it works very well when we have an ambulance base with a fire station. And, you know, I think if we go into Seaforth, I think that arrangement works very well. And then the one generator will service both. I do have a little concern about putting them all in all of them right now. I'm going to pick on Goderich here only because, you know, further on in our agenda here, they're talking, you know, possible recommendation from ORH about, you know, moving that base. So to me, if that's up for discussion, I wouldn't want to put a generator there until I know what direction we're going to do as far as moving that base, as opposed to leaving it there. But I do agree with Councillor Finch that $50,000 for a station isn't something outrageous. I just like the idea of putting them with fire halls and making one do two. Thank you.
Past Warden McClellan.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. And I certainly was going to make a similar comment, but I was going to talk about the EMS base in Tuckersmith because there has been some talk and negotiations about having a joint EMS and fire hall in Seaforth. If there's any chance that that's going to happen within the next 2 or 3 years, that moves significantly forward, then I'd say save the $50,000. If it was going to be a decade out, that's kind of a different story at that point. But I'd rather hear what the potential timelines are before I'd make a commitment to spending the money.
Looking to see if there's any other hands, and CEO Megan Work would like to respond to this.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Warden. I mean, I think perhaps if there is an appetite from council, we can bring back a scenario for options. I think from our perspective, this isn't necessarily a staff recommendation. Again, it isn't a requirement at the sites. I think on a go forward basis, absolutely, this is something that we would want to consider, but we can bring, if there is an appetite from council, we can bring back a report outlining some potential options based on our best guess, whether or not the Seaforth actually moves forward. Ultimately, that's going to be a council decision. You know, whether or not the relocation of Goderich happens, again, that's going to be a council decision. And we can't, as a staff, get out any further ahead from council than where they are right now. So it's difficult for us to really provide that additional information to you on that. Fundamentally, County Council, this isn't included in your budget, and you have asked us to come up with numbers between 3% and 5%. So I would also remind you of that. What we are doing behind the scenes is coming up with cuts to allow that to happen. And, you know, it's only $50,000, but we are currently looking for pockets of $50,000 all throughout the budget at this time. So I'll also throw that additional information out for you as well.
Thank you for those comments. Councillor Basnet.
So would it be appropriate to make a motion for a staff report to come back to council with options? I know there's a lot of uncertainty though. We're like no decision has been made about the Goderich base. It's up for discussion, and there's a lot of decisions that are going to happen in the future. So I think options are good, realizing that nothing is set in stone either. And I would agree with CAO Wark in regards to we've directed staff to come back with the budget between that 3% and 5% number. So if we continue to add things, it makes it a little difficult for staff to navigate through as well. So those are my comments.
And I believe Jeff Kerslake would like to add something there as well.
Yeah, thank you, Warden. Another consideration is certainly the financials, but the work capacity as well. I don't know that even if we could find the money to cover the cost in 2025, I don't know that we could pull this off in 2025. We're pretty busy as a department already, and I think we'd have to be careful. So I think it would be my preference would be to look into 2026 for an install of generators, not 2025, which might give us more time to plan.
Thank you for that, Jeff. Last word, Councillor Finch.
Yeah, thank you. And that's really what I was looking for is a 2026 investment. I remind council too, if a generator is installed, it doesn't go bad. If a new build is constructed someplace, it can just be transferred to the new build. It's not going to expire. I think, risk management 2026, I think is a good time to do that. It gives staff lots of time to come back with a report. But I'd look forward to that. I'd make the motion to do that.
So motion made for a staff report to come back.
Yes.
Is there a seconder for that motion? Councillor Basnet. Those in favor?
Question for clarification, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, clarification.
Yeah. But I'm assuming he's talking about a report that will be considered for the 2026 budget, not this budget.
That is correct.
Because I didn't think I heard that in the motion.
Okay, Councillor Finch, would you like to put that in specifically in the motion for clarification?
Yeah, that's fine. I didn't think we could do it in 2025, but I think once this report came back, we needed to do something and start to get the wheels going on this. So yeah, 2026 is what I'm looking at.
And in fairness, we're not in the same room. Sometimes you can look across real quick, but I thought that was your intent, so I wasn't too worried. But I know that if the motion doesn't exactly read right, the clerk looks at us later.
So the clerk has just come on screen, so either I'm in trouble for missing something or she has a motion to offer us.
I'm hoping I have a motion to offer you. It's the conversation's been going around a little bit. So is the direction, are we looking at a report regarding the future locations of ambulance bases in the county? Or are we looking for a report on the generators?
On the generators, if I may.
Okay.
Okay.
Give me 2 seconds.
Yep.
Okay. I believe this has been moved by Councillor French, seconded by Councillor Bazinet. If you will agree with the motion that I'm looking at, the Council of the County of Huron directs staff to prepare a report that outlines options regarding installations of generators at ambulance bases in Huron County for the 2026 budget.
So moved, yes.
And seconder is good with that.
I am good with that.
Those in favor? That is carried. Thank you, Jeff. So we're going to move on to our memorandum of understanding with Angelette, and Cheryl Patience is available for questions if there is any on this report.
Excuse me, Warden, would you mind terribly going back and approving the motion to receive the report from Jeff Kerslake?
Yeah, a bit of a pattern here, isn't there? So I would be looking for a motion to receive the report from Jeff Kerslake. And that is Councillor Anderson and seconded by Councillor Harding. Those in favor? And that is carried. All right, any questions for Cheryl on the memorandum of understanding? Seeing none, there is a prepared motion in our package. Is there someone willing to put that motion forward? That's passed Warden McNeil and seconded by Councillor Finch. Those in favor? And that is carried. Number 5 is the end of operating agreements, and Barbara Hall is going to be presenting this for us.
Thank
Welcome,
you.
Barbara.
Thank you, Warden Heffer, and through you to members of council. I've taken the 5-page report and condensed it just into a bit of an overview here. It's much shorter. In September 2024, a terms of reference was submitted to County Council regarding the end of operating agreements for the 1 cooperative and 4 nonprofit housing providers in Huron County. The terms of reference identified that 2 reports would subsequently be presented to Council. The report in today's agenda is the first of these 2 reports, and it provides a background and overview of the existing operating agreements. The second report, anticipated in late Q2 or into Q3 of this year, will give consideration to a new service agreement framework and will identify further financial information regarding costs associated with housing providers. The province developed new service agreement provisions to clarify the relationship between service managers and legislated Part 7 housing providers once their respective mortgages mature. The proposed new service agreements have stipulated requirements, including a minimum of a 10-year term, a joint financial plan. It will require service managers to continue funding RGI assistance and the continued use of the centralized waitlist, along with dispute resolution. Our Part 7 nonprofits and cooperative housing providers account for 112 of the rent geared to income units within the county's legislated service level standards. It is possible for housing providers to exit the system rather than enter into a new service agreement. However, exit agreements will be required and carry their own stipulations. Please note that the county, as service manager, must still maintain the same number of RGI units in our service level standards, even if the housing provider chooses to seek an exit agreement. The province launched the Community Housing Renewal Strategy, which introduced modernized approaches to broaden the types of housing assistance counted towards required service levels, which previously only counted RGI units identified within the Housing Services Act. To sustain existing affordable housing options for residents with low and moderate income, it's critical that housing providers remain in the system after their respective mortgage matures. Program costs for our Part 7 housing providers, based on the current prescribed funding formula, were just a little over $1 million in 2024. This was partially offset by provincial and federal revenue of $327,000, resulting in a levy cost of $680,000 in 2024. As each operating agreement ends, the provincial and federal funding will end with it, and program costs will eventually be 100% levy. The second report in this series, anticipated in Q2 or Q3 of 2025, will further identify financial information regarding costs associated with housing providers, along with key principles, budget, and regulatory requirements. So thank you for the opportunity to present information on the upcoming end of operating agreements in Part 1 of this 2-part series.
Thank you, Barbara. Is there any comments or questions from council? Seeing none, then I'd be looking for someone to receive this report from Barbara Hall. That is Councillor Vanstone, seconded by Councillor Heffer. Those in favor? And that is carried.
Thank you.
I'm going to suggest that we stop for a 5-minute recess. And Susan, just give us the opportunity to do that, and then we'll come and reconvene in 5 minutes. Thank you. All right, we're going to move on to emergency services, item 10 on our agenda. And we have a designation of a community emergency management coordinator. And I would like to take this opportunity to introduce David Wagner. He has assumed the role as the superintendent of emergency planning and community emergency management coordinator for the County of Huron. David has been a paramedic for over 25 years and has worked for the county since the download of paramedic services in 2001. In addition to his paramedic position, David has been a paramedic superintendent for over 5 years and has additional experience as a firefighter and an incident manager. David assumed this role on January the 31st, and we certainly like to extend our welcome to David for this new position.
And Jeff is available here for any questions. And there is a motion to receive the report and to draft a bylaw appointing David Wagner as our Community Emergency Management Coordinator. So first, if there's any questions for Jeff, and if not, then a motion for the, that is Councillor Becker, and Alvin McClellan would second that. Those in favor? And that is carried. And number 2 under emergency services is the Operational Research and Health Limited. And Jeff Horseman is available for questions if there's any questions on this. Go ahead, Councillor Finch.
Yeah, thank you, through the warden. Great report, Jeff. Well done. I'm just wondering, if there's a program I understand that London Health Sciences or the London paramedics use called Fit to Sit. Do you know much about that? Is there something we can incorporate in the county, or is there discussions about that now? I think it's a great opportunity to alleviate some of the unloading times at the hospitals.
Through you,
Jeff, are you able?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Warden, to Councillor Finch. It's actually funny that you were asking this question this morning. I have been in negotiations and talks with all 5 Huron County Hospital site locations about formalizing a Fit to Sit program. So some of our hospital sites use an off the cuff, if you will, Fit to Sit program that they're used to, and you know, other like physicians use if they work in multiple facilities, and they're used to it. But I've been trying the last several months trying to formalize that. It appears that we have an agreement with the 5 sites. It looks like the launch time or the go live date is looking like, as of this morning, probably April 1st to formally launch the program at all 5 sites. In the meantime, they'll use the one-off situations that we've been utilizing. But yes, to answer your question, it looks like there will be a formal program in place probably on April 1st.
Follow up, Councillor Finch?
Yeah, and that's great to hear, Jeff. I appreciate all your work you do behind the scenes for that. I'm wondering if county council may not know what that program is. Could you maybe just advise them what that is?
Sure. So basically, it's a program that will help offload patients that don't require ongoing paramedic care when we arrive at a facility that is unable to take that individual right away. So if they're having a busy day, often we see this in our Huron sites. It's often Goderich or Exeter Hospital. That you know, that they have several patients and we can't offload our patient direct into a treatment room. And if that patient does not, you know, meets the criteria that we've agreed to amongst all the hospital sites, meets that criteria, they're stable, you know, we have a whole criteria list that we all have to agree to. Then the patient would be offloaded into the waiting room, just like any other patient walk-in would go to the waiting room after they're triaged by the triage nurse, and it's confirmed that that patient doesn't need ongoing care and is stable. We'll offload them to the normal waiting room, and that will free up our paramedics to get back on the road. Currently, without that system in place, our paramedics would wait with that patient until the treatment room becomes available, which can be significant period of time. So,
thank you for that, Jeff. Any other questions for Jeff on this? Then we'd be looking for a motion to Councillor Becker.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Warden. It's a great move, Jeff. Thank you for this report, because that's been a concern of mine with the wait times of the paramedics being at the 2 hospitals, what we've seen in the different reports coming lately. And I'll make a motion that we move this report that Jeff has presented.
So motion has been made to receive, and Councillor Finch would second that. Those in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. Next on our agenda is economic development, and Trish Denemy is available for questions regarding the Starter Company Plus program for 2024. Welcome, Trish. Is there any questions? Go ahead, Councillor Basnet.
No question, just a quick comment. Thank you for everything that you do. This is a great opportunity for the people that take the time to apply. A wealth of information that's provided to these future business owners and a great opportunity. I've heard nothing but good things from people that have been through the program before and attending near the end of the last one where they, received, some awards or whatever, certifications, so to speak. A lot of smiles on people's faces, including the ActDev team as well. So I know there's probably a lot of pride involved with all the work that goes into it. So thank you.
Thank you. And I don't see Trish, but I see Vicky with us. So Vicky, certainly pass that on. That good job, and it's a really good program, and it was good uptake for this last year.
Thank you very much. I will make sure Trish knows and the rest of the team.
Thank you. So a motion then to receive the report. Past Warden again, Councillor Bazinet, those in favor. And that is carried. And Vicky is available for questions on the Ministry of Rural Affairs strategy overview. The latest information presented to those of us that were at Roma. Any questions for Vicky? If not, I'd be looking for a motion to receive this report. So Councillor Anderson, Councillor Noel would second that. Those in favor? And that is carried. Thank you, Vicky. And the farm succession planning project update. And again, Vicky is available for questions on this. Councillor Klopp.
Thank you. Thank you, Vicky, for that report. I was when you wrote in the second paragraph, the alarming trend of investment funds purchasing farmland. I was taken a little bit back by that because it's been something that I know I've been talking about, been told about as far down as going to Windsor 10 years ago for a party, and they found out I was a farmer. When you're, I guess they're getting so few, they want to look at you and ask questions. But anyway, so I agree totally. The provincial policy and about the issue of succession planning, and there is always definitely a line there. The sad thing is when I read down further about what is said when a farmer is having a mental issue, and my sense is, based on unfortunately seeing it firsthand, they use the word, they use those words, and probably they don't have a further bracket. So it's succession planning, but it's really, from my experience in talking to some farmers, it's just the hope is gone. You work hard and you just don't see it. So that just, I think that needs to be said, unfortunately, and it goes back to economics, and a lot of us fight for that, and that's fine. But going back to even what can we do here at the county, the provincial policy of 100 acres, and of course it was viable. And of course the other argument is, well, little fields around, farmers don't want to be running around for 25 acres and 30 acres. That's just crazy. Well, I can tell you they do run around. And yet when we talk about the other shoe, those policies are written by provincial ministries, and they based on lobbying, and there is no surprise to see it, but big businesses like 100 acres. It's a lot easier to you make more money getting 100 acres than you do getting 50. It's the same amount of work, but the reality is we have farmers that want to start farming, and that level's at the 30,000, and we at the local level, we get to make decisions. So I think we should keep that in mind when we hear a farmer, and even if it's a neighbor's son or daughter, and they say they'd like 25 acres carved off because they want to start an apple orchard, or they want to start a greenery, or they just something that is in agriculture. Yes, the policy that says, oh, you can't cut off 100 acres. Keep in mind that the policy is exactly one of the reasons why we have the situation that we have of less and less farmers. And so those are the kind of things that we can think about, put the economics and what the very good comments that were written in this report about what farmers are more than just making a profit. And I commend that you got me thinking about that. So I just think just keep that in mind as we at our local level. Yes, we have to take the policy there. It's at 30,000 feet on a lot of issues, but the government did allow us to twig it. And that's something that if every time we can get one more person, maybe that 50-acre chunk that was severed off, I know from hearing it from people, and I've seen it personally, when it landed at any dollar amount, it's the house and a bit of acreage, and it gets that farmer started. In my generation, there's a lot that started that way. And so let's keep that in mind as we go forward, because it is, as you say, a really bad trend now that big company investments are coming in there, Vicky, and I'm glad that you put that in there. So thank you.
Thank you for those comments. Any other questions, comments for Vicky? So I'd be looking for someone to put forward a motion to receive this report, and that is Councillor Finch, seconded by Councillor Heffer. Those in favor? And that is carried. Thank you, Vicky.
Thank you, Warren.
Under 13 on our agenda is administration policies and other issues. And there's been a refresh of the Huron County website, and Aaron Samuels is available for any questions that would be related to that. Not seeing any questions, so then I'd be looking for a motion to receive the report by Aaron Samuel on the refresh of the website. So that is Councillor Dietrich, seconded by Councillor Finch. Those in favor? And that is carried. And service level review, and our CAO Megan is going to present this for us.
Yeah, thank you very much, Warden Heffer. So through you to County Council, this is a refresher report for County Council. We went through the service review process. There were 5 key areas that County Council wanted us to focus on. This report outlines what those 5 key priority areas were. And then there's also a list in the report of subsequent reports that came back to County Council associated with items that we discussed as a result of that time that we spent together. For Council's awareness, March 24th, 25th, next month, we'll be sitting down. We'll be having a similar kind of conversation as a group. So this is an opportunity for Council to reprioritize or to do some additional thinking on where we are as a corporation, as a community. And we will sit down, senior staff and Council, and come up with new priority areas on a go-forward basis. So just wanted to circle back, bring this information back in front of County Council at this time, and look forward to those discussions coming up in March.
Thank you, Megan. So that has been for our information, and we'll look forward to the end of March and having those sessions. So I'd be looking for someone to receive this report for information, and that is Councillor Noel and Councillor Klopp.
May I have a question?
Sure, go ahead.
I'll second to receive. Thank you. It goes under the section of the service review with planning. There was 2 reports there, and thank you for the reminders of it. But in paragraph 2, section 69 of the Planning Act, that's where I was reading, and in the same paragraph it states costs are not charged for overhead and head brackets, office space, computer hardware, training, etc. So then when we looking at back in 2024, I believe it was around 1.4 million. Now this year's estimated at 1.7 for dollars that come out of the revenue on the levy. So my question is, these numbers, do they represent then the overhead of the planning department and not any wages?
Megan, can you address that?
Yeah, I can get started, and then maybe Denise can bring the information back or Denise can provide any perspective that she may have. So the report that is outlined in front of you, I think speaks to those fees that are associated just with the planning process, Councillor Klopp. I think there are other fees, there are other programs that are offered within the department that wouldn't necessarily be reflected within those numbers that were included in that report. I don't know if Denise would have additional comments that she would want to make.
Go ahead, Denise.
Thank you very much. Through the warden. Yes, the planning fees report accounts for the cost of planning applications that are charged to applicants. So those costs, we do not include overhead, so nothing for office space, computers, or training. It's meant to be that planning fees are for the cost of the time to process the application. So that's sort of what the planning fees, the revenue, that's how it's outlined in the Planning Act, and then we followed that through our process.
Okay, thank you for that.
Okay, thank you.
So there is a motion on the floor to receive this report. Those in favor? And that is carried. Is there anything under correspondence that anybody wants to speak to? Councillor Finch?
Yes, thank you, Warden. I'm just wondering if council has the appetite to support 14.2, 14.3, and 14.5 in regards to tariffs and sovereignty of Canada.
So you're putting that forward as a motion?
That's correct. To support those.
And is there a seconder for those three? And that is Councillor McClellan, past Warden McClellan.
Can I also speak on that, Mr. Warden?
Yep, go ahead.
When I read those through, and it's not that I agree with everything in there as far as a lower tier mayor, I'm not sure that I have enough information to always give valuable input, but the overall concept of what they're talking about in our governments working together to promote, whether it be farming or industry or whatever in Canada, I think it's about time that we actually did a little better job of that. We certainly know our neighbors to the south have pushed themselves as the number one, and I would think at any time that we can help promote ourselves to the Canadian citizen is going to be a good move forward.
Councillor Finch?
Yes, and I totally agree with that. I think the tariffs have actually created a situation where Canada is even more united than it ever was because of this. And I think it's important to work together, whether it be through municipalities, counties, regions, etc., and especially across borders of provinces. So I think anything we can do at a lower tier to support this, it shows that solidarity.
Okay. Not seeing any other hands, so I'm going to call the question. Those in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. And I'd be looking for motion to accept correspondence that was not specifically dealt with. Councillor Finch, seconded by Councillor Noel. Those in favor? And that is carried as well. And under new and unfinished business, there is a notice of motion, and I'm going to turn it over to Councillor Klopp to speak to his notice of motion. And Denise Van Amersfoort is available to answer questions regarding this as well when the time comes.
Thank you, and thank my seconder for bringing this motion up. I think the final the therefore it be resolved is always the most important thing, and I think it basically let's have a report. I tie it no different, and I'll give two examples. One went forward, and one is we're looking at it and maybe want some more direction, or it definitely wasn't ready to go forward. And I see this no different. I look to the Home for the Aged, asked for a report. then one that I guess actually two of us are probably the only ones that are on council then, and I won't embarrass them. But the plumbing motion was asked, let's look at that, and it went further, and it ended up being downloaded. But the point is, this motion is asking for a report, and then we see what it becomes. There, I might be the first one to go, wow, this is not what I was thinking. But again, I think it really just I think is our job as counselors to ask staff to shake the tree a bit and see what they can come up with. And I think that this is the way to go. It doesn't get the staff having to get great detail, but it gets enough that we can have some debate and then see where it goes. And so I rest it to my fellow colleagues. Thank you.
All right. Any other comments? Councillor Harding.
This notice of motion really got my attention on when they were talking about savings, and we're all looking for savings, especially in the climate we're living in these days. But I was also very concerned with this notice of motion that as one of the smaller municipalities, or probably the smallest, and sharing a planner and needing the expertise of a planning department and stuff, I just was very concerned where this was going, and with little education to the people it's affecting. So as long as I understand now that this is going to be studied and presented to us, I can sleep better at night, because this every municipality is different, and I think we got to remember that. And we've been able to get along as an upper tier municipality with these differences and things that one end of the spectrum proposes and the other one helps them to understand or get what they want done accomplished. So I think this is very, very important to me as the sole representative from Howick Township, and been bouncing it off some of my colleagues down in that country that as long as we're going to study this and not make any rapid decisions, I'm pleased with that.
Councillor Noel.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. I would like to maybe build on Councillor Harding's comments with a question for Councillor Klopp for clarification. I just want to understand that what the report you're looking for is asking for an assessment of both the advantages and the disadvantages to the lower tiers and to us as the upper tier, in terms of financial and operations and human resources efficiencies. Is that a fair assessment of what you would like to see?
That is more than fair. I'm though giving a little license that the based on what I think is why this motion is written the way it is, the staff will obviously have reports exactly what you're talking about, but on the first report, I don't expect them to be so detailed. No different than what was with when I vaguely remember the plumbing one, or we've had a number. The latest one, of course, was our senior home idea. They gave a pretty good pros and cons, and then seeing if council wants to go further. And so that's what that's what I'm expecting in this. And then we will have that debate. But for sure, it's not I had a one-sided idea that you usually come with that when you make a motion, but there's got to be some reasons why what I'm missing, and this is the process that we have.
Councillor Harding.
Just for a follow-up, thank you, Councillor Noel, for summarizing my rant. I think you've hit the nail right on the head, and you're far better at that than I could ever express it. But I think that it gets the whole thing right in a nutshell, and that's what we want. Because we know they're going to find stuff that we, in this last little, that there's some things that vary to some of those figures that have presented. And so we need that brought to our attention, and we need this a wholesome discussion.
All right, any further comments? Past Warden McClellan.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. I do remember when the whole plumbing thing went through, and I think for the most part, it's probably worked out fairly well for all the lower tier municipalities, and it was a good thing. And I'm really happy to see a report come through. I took the time to sit down with our CAO and have a pretty good discussion about what we thought the pros and cons would be, at least from a Huron East perspective. One of the things that really sticks out with me, and I'm sure this will come back in the report, but there is a big advantage from a planning perspective of having a single agency responsible across the entire county is that the planners themselves get to bounce ideas back and forth, but we also try to be consistent across the entire county. And even if there is some savings at the end of the day, I think there may be some positive things that are beneficial, because I don't want to see municipalities start to fight with other municipalities, as in, we're going to change the rules a little bit to allow stuff in our area that somebody else doesn't allow in theirs. And not being consistent across the county may not be a good thing for us at the end of the day. So I'm more than happy to have a report come back and point out all the things that are positive and negative, and where the costs actually go, so that we understand. Because even with the questions I asked when we were going through the budget process, I actually thought at the time that a lot more of the planning fees were covering all the costs of the planning department, but Sandra did a good job of explaining that there's a lot of things that the planning fees don't take care of that are just our responsibility at a county level. So I think this report will shed a lot of light on things for us.
Okay, any further comments? Past Warden Ginn, and then Past Warden McNeil.
Yeah, thank you. I was going to hold my comments until the report actually came back, but just as a bit of caution that I would like to express, is that everybody says when the plumbing went to the lower tiers, we made it an agreement with Huron East, and it worked well for a few years, and now we are entering into agreement with the town of Goderich for a plumbing inspector for one day. My point is it's difficult to right size the workload, and when you can spread it across the county, I think that maybe becomes a little easier. But I'll support the motion to look at it. Always never hurts to have a look. The thing that keeps coming into my mind is I realized when we did the amalgamation of the Huron County and Perth County health units, and CAO work was there at the time, they had service level agreements between the town of St. Mary's, the city of Stratford, and the county of Perth. It took them 8 years to get an agreement. And what a waste of staff time. So we've got to be very careful that we don't waste some of our time at the lower tiers putting into agreements to try and right size the job with the employees. So just a word of caution there. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Past Warden McNeil.
Thank you very much, Warden Heffer. From my perspective, any time that we go outside of Huron County, many people will say to us that our planning department is the envy of other counties. We have had a planning department for over 50 years, and it's looked at with a lot of appreciation. I think there's a lot of efficiencies that can be gained at the county level, and that's what we're all looking for, is efficiencies, combined with synergies. And the comment was made that planners can bounce ideas off each other, and it's very, very important that we're consistent in all of our municipalities throughout Huron County. So again, I do question the value of the staff time that would be put into this. However, I bring that perspective of efficiencies and the envy that Huron has in the eyes of other counties. Thank you very much, Mr. Warden.
Thank you. Any further comments? So I am going to call the question regarding this notice of motion. Those that are in favor. And that is carried. And at 16 on our agenda, and it's notice of motion. Is there any notice of motion to put forward today? Seeing none, we're going to move on to our bylaws. And I would be looking for a mover and a seconder to introduce bylaw number 25 and give it its first, second, and third reading. So that is Councillor Finch, seconded by Councillor Dietrich. Those in favor? That is carried. There is no close to the public session. We have a list of upcoming meetings, so make yourself aware of those. And I'd be looking for someone to confirm our actions for this morning. Councillor Klopp, and seconded by Councillor Becker. Those in favor? That is carried. And I'd be happy to entertain a motion to adjourn from Councillor Dietrich and Councillor Heffer. Those in favor? That is carried. Thank you for your comments for the meeting and enjoy the rest of your day in Huron County's winter wonderland.
Just a quick note, Warden Heffer, the Maitland Valley Conservation Authority general meeting for today at 2 o'clock has now been canceled. It'll be held next Wednesday at 2. So sorry about interrupting, but I just wanted to make everybody aware of that.
Thank you for that update. Appreciate it. So for those of you that were planning, that's next Wednesday at 2 o'clock. All right. Thank you.